In the book of Genesis, we find one of the strangest and most profound stories in the entire Bible, the story of Jacob wrestling with God. It's a short, mysterious account of a man in crisis who has a bizarre, all-night showdown with an unknown figure, and he walks away from it wounded, but with a new name and a new identity. This story is a pivotal moment in the life of Jacob, the grandson of Abraham, and it offers a deep insight into the complex and often paradoxical nature of a relationship with the God of the Bible. To understand what's happening in this scene, we first need to understand the man Jacob. The name Jacob, in Hebrew, Yaakov, is a play on the word for heel, because when he was born, he was grabbing the heel of his older twin brother. This name came to mean deceiver or usurper, and for most of his life, Jacob lived up to it. From his youth, he was defined by schemes and manipulation. He tricked his famished brother Esau into selling his birthright, the inheritance and status of the firstborn son, for a bowl of stew. Later, with his mother Rebekah's help, he deceived his blind elderly father Isaac. He disguised himself as Esau to steal the blessing that was meant for his brother, a blessing that carried with it the covenant promise God had made to Abraham. These acts of deception shattered his family. To escape Esau's murderous rage, Jacob was forced to flee his home, leaving behind everything he knew. He journeyed to a distant land to live with his uncle Laban, who, it turns out, was a master of deception himself. What followed were 20 years of struggle and rivalry. Laban tricked Jacob into marrying his older daughter Leah, before allowing him to marry Rachel, the woman he truly loved. Jacob then spent years working for his uncle, constantly trying to outmaneuver him, building up his own wealth through clever and sometimes questionable breeding techniques. The deceiver found himself being deceived, and his life became a tangled web of conflict and striving, all driven by his own ambition and fear. After 2 decades, God told Jacob it was time to return to his homeland. But this meant confronting the past he had run from. Specifically, it meant facing his brother, Esau. The last time they saw each other, Esau had vowed to kill him. Now, as Jacob prepared to re-enter the Promised Land, he received word that Esau was coming to meet him, accompanied by 400 men. Jacob was terrified. His life of clever schemes had led him to this moment of ultimate vulnerability. He was trapped. He couldn't go back, and he feared going forward would mean his and his family's destruction. So, Jacob did what he always did. He came up with a plan. He divided his large family and all his possessions into 2 camps, hoping that if Esau attacked one, the other might escape. Then he prepared an elaborate gift, a massive procession of goats, camels, and cattle, sending them ahead in waves to try and appease his brother's anger. It was a strategic, calculated move, born of panic. After sending his family and all his possessions across the Jabbok River, a boundary marking the edge of the Promised Land, Jacob was left completely alone in the darkness. He had sent away everything and everyone he had spent his life accumulating. He was stripped of his wealth, his family, and his self-reliance. It is in this moment of total isolation and desperation that the story takes its strange turn, the text says, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. We aren't told who this man is, where he came from, or why they started fighting. The wrestling match is intense and lasts all night long. Jacob, the striver and schemer, is now in a physical struggle for his life. He has spent his whole life wrestling metaphorically with his brother, his father, and his uncle. Now, this struggle becomes literal. He's holding on with every ounce of his strength, refusing to let go. As dawn approaches, the man sees that he cannot overpower Jacob. So, he reaches out and touches Jacob's hip, dislocating it with a simple, effortless touch. This single act reveals the true nature of Jacob's opponent. This is no ordinary man. He possesses a power that could have ended the fight at any moment. The wrestling match wasn't a contest of equal strength. The man had been holding back, allowing Jacob to struggle. The injury is significant. Jacob's greatest source of strength, his physical ability to strive and run, is now broken. He will walk with a limp for the rest of his life. A permanent reminder of his weakness and this night of struggle. Yet even with a dislocated hip, Jacob doesn't let go. He clings to the man, broken but resolute. The man tells him, "Let me go, for the day is broken." But Jacob replies with a demand that marks a turning point in his character. He says, I will not let you go unless you bless me. This is a new kind of wrestling for Jacob. In the past, he took blessings through deception and trickery. He stole his father's blessing by pretending to be someone else. Now wounded and vulnerable, he's not trying to trick anyone. He is holding on with brutal honesty, face to face with this powerful being, and he is demanding a blessing. He knows he cannot take it by force or by cunning. He can only receive it as a gift. It's an act of desperate faith, born from the end of his own strength. The man then asks him a pivotal question: "What is your name?" This is more than a simple request for information. In ancient Hebrew thought, a name represented a person's essence, their character and destiny. To state his name is to confess who he is. He answers, "Jacob," which means the deceiver. For the first time, Jacob owns his identity. He's not pretending to be Esau. He is admitting to his life of deception and struggle in the presence of this divine being. In response to his confession, the man gives him a new name. He says, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." The name Israel in Hebrew Yisrael means he strives with God or God strives. This new name doesn't erase his past, but it redefines it. His life of striving has been transformed. He prevailed, not by overpowering God, but by clinging to him in his weakness and refusing to let go until he received a blessing. The paradox is that Jacob's victory came through surrender. He won by losing. He found strength when he finally acknowledged his weakness. After receiving his new name and his blessing, Jacob, now Israel, asks the man for his name. But the man deflects the question, saying, "Why is it that you ask my name?" He then blesses him there. Jacob doesn't get a direct answer, but he understands who he has been with. He names the place Peniel, which means face of God. For he says, "I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered." Jacob recognized that he had encountered the very God of his grandfather Abraham and his father Isaac. And in a culture where it was believed that no one could see God and live, Jacob's survival was itself a sign of God's profound grace. As the sun rose, Jacob, now Israel, limped away from Peniel. The man who had entered the darkness as a fearful deceiver, relying on his own wits, emerged into the light as a wounded believer marked by his encounter with God. He immediately encounters Esau, and the reunion he dreaded is completely transformed. Instead of approaching Esau with a clever plan, the newly named Israel bows down to the ground 7 times. This is an act of total humility. He's no longer the usurper trying to get ahead of his brother. Esau, seeing this profound change in his brother, runs to meet him, embraces him, and weeps. The 400 men are not an army of destruction, but an honor guard. The conflict that had defined Jacob's life is resolved, not through strategy, but through God's transformative grace. The story of Jacob wrestling with God is a powerful portrait of what it can mean to have faith. It's not always a peaceful or easy journey. Sometimes faith looks like a struggle in the dark. It means grappling with doubt, fear, and our own past. It's about being brought to the end of our own strength and forced to rely on God in our weakness. Jacob's limp is a permanent symbol of this truth. True strength in a relationship with God is found not in our own power, but in our humble dependence on His. His new name, Israel, would go on to become the name for the entire nation that descended from him. And just like their ancestor, the people of Israel would have their own history of striving with God. This story sets a pattern for a relationship with God that is not passive, but active, honest, and sometimes feels like a fight. But it's a fight that leads to blessing, a new identity, and a face-to-face encounter with the surprising grace of God.